Carter stood at the edge of the vast Montana rifle range, her small frame almost swallowed by the towering backdrop of pine-covered hills. The morning sun glinted off the metal targets in the distance, making them look impossibly tiny from where she stood. Her hands rested lightly on the stock of her rifle, fingers brushing the cool wood, her knuckles tightening ever so slightly. Every instinct in her body screamed both excitement and fear. She was about to face a crowd of people who didn't believe she belonged here, people who had already made their assumptions about her before a single shot was fired. As walked forward, she felt the weight of their stares. The group was a mix of seasoned hunters, ex-military veterans, and local shooting enthusiasts, all of whom had been training together for years. Their eyes followed her every move, some filled with curiosity, but many with thinly veiled contempt. She heard the whispers before she even reached the lineup. "She can't even hold that rifle properly. Watch her fumble the first shot. Bet she misses everything." A low chuckle ran through a few of the men near the back, kept her face neutral, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. She had learned early on that showing fear or frustration was the first mistake that would be exploited. Instead, she focused on the smell of the pine and the faint tang of gunpowder in the air. She let the rhythm of her breathing steady her, a technique her father had drilled into her since she was a child. Her father, a retired Army marksman, had been her first teacher, her guide, and her greatest supporter. He had taught her that precision was not just a skill of the hand, but of the mind. "The rifle listens to calm hands," he had told her countless times, his voice calm and unwavering. She remembered the hours in the backyard, targets lined up along the fence, the sun setting behind them, and her father quietly correcting her grip, her stance, and her breath. He never rushed her. He had taught her to respect the weapon and the process. But that was years ago, after her father passed suddenly, had stepped away from shooting. The rifle, once a comforting extension of herself, had collected dust in the corner of her room. It had been her father's passion, and for a time, a part of her identity she didn't know how to reclaim. Now, standing on the range, she realized that stepping back into this world would be harder than she imagined, not because of the technical challenge, but because of the judgment surrounding her. The instructor, a tall man with a square jaw and the unmistakable posture of someone who had spent decades in the military, called the group to attention. His voice was firm but fair. "All right, everyone, today's session will be a standard evaluation. We'll see where each of you stands before we move on to advanced drills." His gaze swept over the group, pausing briefly on. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, a small acknowledgement that she might not be the typical recruit he had anticipated. His pulse quickened. She adjusted her stance, planting her feet shoulder-width apart, aligning her shoulders with the target. She gripped the rifle, feeling the familiar weight, though it seemed heavier than she remembered. Her fingers traced the stock, and for a moment she felt the presence of her father beside her, offering silent reassurance. The whispers around her grew louder as the trainees began to speculate, openly now, about her lack of experience. "First time on a real range, huh?" one of the men sneered. "Better make sure someone spots her, or we'll be cleaning up after a mess," another added, laughing. Stomach tightened. She could feel her cheeks flushing, a mixture of embarrassment and irritation, but she refused to let their words dictate her performance. Instead, she took a deep breath, recalling every lesson her father had given her. She remembered the countless times she had closed her eyes and visualized each shot hitting the center of the target. She remembered the meticulous adjustments he had made to her stance, the subtle shifts in grip, the importance of steady breathing. The instructor began the session, calling each trainee forward in turn. One by one, the seasoned shooters approached their targets, firing with precision honed over years of practice. The sound of rifles echoed across the valley, punctuated by the metallic clang of bullets hitting their marks. Each perfect shot drew murmurs of approval from the others, reinforcing sense of being an outsider. She felt a pang of doubt creeping in, but she pushed it aside. This was her moment to reconnect with a part of herself she had abandoned, a part that her father had always believed in. Finally, it was her turn. stepped forward, her boots crunching on the gravel. She could feel every eye on her, the weight of expectation and skepticism pressing down on her shoulders. The men who had mocked her moments before leaned forward slightly, eager to witness what they assumed would be failure. She positioned herself, bringing the rifle to her shoulder, aligning her sight with the first target. Her hands were steady, her mind focused. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her body. She remembered her father's words, "Focus. The rifle listens to calm hands." And then, almost instinctively, she squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out across the range, sharp and confident. The bullet struck the target with precision, hitting the center almost effortlessly. A hush fell over the group. Her heart pounded, but her hands remained steady. One shot was not a fluke. It was a signal that she was back, that the skills her father had instilled in her were still alive, ready to be called upon. She adjusted her stance and fired again. Another bullseye. The room was silent now, the mocking eyes replaced with wide-eyed astonishment. Didn't allow herself to smile just yet. She had more to prove, more to demonstrate that her calm, focused approach could not be underestimated. By the time she had finished the first set of shots, had regained a part of herself she thought she had lost forever. The whispers that had once mocked her were replaced by murmurs of disbelief and admiration. She lowered the rifle slowly, her chest rising and falling in controlled breaths, her mind sharp and clear. For the first time in years, she felt truly connected to her father's teachings, her confidence slowly rebuilding with each target she hit. Walked back to the lineup, the weight of her initial fear replaced by a quiet determination. She had survived the scrutiny, proved a point to herself, and in doing so, rekindled a passion she thought she had lost. She knew this was just the beginning. The real test, both of skill and of character, lay ahead. But for now, she had made her mark. And everyone watching knew, silently, that Carter was not someone to be underestimated. Walked away from the first round of shots, her hands still tingling from the rifle's recoil. The murmurs around her were no longer mocking but tinged with disbelief. Yet, despite the temporary sense of accomplishment, her mind drifted to a quieter place, to a time long before she had ever stepped onto this formal range, to a backyard far away, where lessons were measured not in grades but in patience, precision, and respect. She remembered the smell of the early morning air, crisp and pine-laden, as her father would lead her into the backyard with a small collection of targets set up at varying distances. Each target had a story. Some were tin cans, others paper cutouts, and a few were old bottles he had collected over the years. "The rifle," he had said, kneeling beside her and adjusting her tiny hands around the stock, "is more than just a weapon. It listens. It mirrors your calm, your focus, your intent. Treat it carelessly, and it will betray you every time." Had been 8 years old when he first handed her a rifle. It was smaller than the ones used by adults, but heavy enough to make her feel its responsibility. Her fingers trembled around the stock, and her eyes widened at the scope. She could still feel that mix of fear and exhilaration, a combination that would become familiar in the years to come. Her father never scolded her for mistakes. Instead, he made her aware of them. "Relax your shoulders. Don't grip it like a hammer," he would say. "Breath in, hold, now release and squeeze the trigger gently. Don't fight the rifle, work with it." Hours passed in silence, punctuated only by the metallic ping of bullets hitting their marks. Sometimes she would miss, and sometimes she would strike the center so perfectly that her father's eyes would light up with pride. But the lessons went deeper than hitting targets. Her father taught her to read the wind, the subtle shifts in the trees, the way light played across the barrel and affected her aim. He taught her to focus not just on the target, but on the process itself: stance, breathing, grip, timing. When he passed away suddenly, all of that practice, all of that careful training was left behind. Stepped away from the rifle, thinking she could never recapture the discipline, the quiet confidence that had once been a part of her. She buried herself in work, in ordinary routines, in life's distractions. And yet every so often, late at night, she would dream of the backyard, the sun low in the sky, the soft crack of bullets finding their marks, and hear her father's calm, guiding voice. Now, years later, standing on a professional range with a crowd of doubters staring at her, that memory returned with full force. The whisper of wind against the pine trees in Montana reminded her of the wind she had learned to read in her father's backyard. The rhythm of her heartbeat mirrored the slow, deliberate breathing exercises he had drilled into her. Every lesson she had once considered lost was still within her, waiting for this moment to be called upon. As she stepped back into position for the next round of shots, allowed herself a small smile. No one in the group knew her story. They didn't know the countless mornings she had risen before dawn, coaxing her own hands into steadiness, whispering encouragement to herself in the way her father had done. They didn't know that the rifle she held wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a connection to the man who had shaped her into the person she had become. A veteran in the group, a man with a weathered face and a voice roughened by years of commanding respect, approached her. "First round went better than expected," he said, though his tone lacked warmth. He squinted as if trying to figure out how a woman who looked so inexperienced could deliver a result that stunned the other trainees. Nodded politely, acknowledging him but saying nothing. Words weren't necessary. The rifle would speak for her, and she intended for it to speak loudly. The next exercise began. Targets were placed at varying distances, some tricky angles, some obscured slightly by obstacles meant to challenge the shooters. One by one, the men and women in the class stepped forward, demonstrating skill that had been honed over years of hunting, military service, and personal practice. Some were precise, others more casual, but all carried an air of confidence that had not yet regained publicly. She observed them carefully, noting not just their technique but their attitudes, the pride, the arrogance, the small mistakes hidden in their movements. When it was turn again, the whispers and bets against her continued. One man laughed openly, saying, "Bet she won't hit the target at 20 yards, let alone 50. Others snickered, not realizing that every ounce of judgment they threw at her would become motivation. Raised her rifle, carefully aligning her stance. She inhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. Her father's voice came back to her, guiding her through every movement. "Relax, focus. The rifle listens to calm hands." The first shot rang out and its bullet struck the target perfectly. A few in the group muttered in disbelief, glancing at each other as though the laws of probability had been. She adjusted slightly, aimed at the next target and fired again, another perfect hit. She didn't hurry. Each motion was deliberate, measured, almost ritualistic. His body remembered what her mind once thought it had lost. Every step, every adjustment, every squeeze of the trigger was a conversation with the memory of her father, a way of proving to herself that skill and focus were never truly gone. They had only waited. As the round progressed, his confidence began to bloom quietly but unmistakably. She noticed the subtle shifts in the wind that others ignored, the sway of the trees that hinted at air currents, the slight incline of the terrain that required minor adjustments. Each shot required patience, awareness, and a still mind, qualities she had cultivated without realizing over a lifetime of practice with her father. By the time she lowered the rifle, she had not only hit each target with precision but had done so with a calmness that seemed almost unnatural to those watching. The instructor, who had been observing quietly, stepped forward with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, his voice carrying both surprise and admiration. Smiled faintly but said nothing. Her training was private, sacred, and personal. She didn't need to boast. The answers weren't for them. They were for her, a reminder that the skills her father had gifted her were alive, that her quiet strength was real, and that she was capable of far more than anyone around her had assumed. As the group moved to the next set of drills, felt a sense of quiet determination settle over her. She had begun this day as an outsider, doubted by all, underestimated and mocked. Yet now she had reclaimed a piece of herself, a part she thought lost to grief and time. The whispers had faded into respectful silence, replaced by curiosity and cautious admiration. Knew the challenges weren't over. There would be more tests, more skeptical eyes, more opportunities to prove herself. But she also knew that her father's lessons, her hidden strength, and her unwavering focus would carry her through. For the first time in years, felt truly present in the moment. The rifle was not just a tool, it was an extension of herself, a bridge to the past, and a pathway to the future. And as the sun climbed higher over the Montana range, she allowed herself to imagine what was possible if she trusted in her skills, her training, and the quiet strength that had been nurtured long before anyone else had ever noticed her. The sun had climbed higher, casting long, sharp shadows across the gravel of the Montana range. Carter had moved through the first few rounds with careful precision, yet the atmosphere around her remained charged with skepticism. While she had impressed the instructor with her calm, flawless shots, the other trainees weren't ready to accept her quiet competence. Some whispered behind their hands, others openly smirked, waiting for the moment when her luck, or lack of experience, would betray her. It was during the next exercise that the reality of the social challenge hit her. Was asked to demonstrate her ability to hit moving targets, a skill that required not just precision but timing and instinct. She adjusted her stance, eyes narrowing slightly as the first target rolled into view. Her heart pounded, not from fear of missing, but from the anticipation of the inevitable judgment that awaited her. "Here we go," muttered one of the veterans, a broad-shouldered man named Carson, loud enough for nearby trainees to hear. "Watch her struggle with a moving target. Bet she won't hit a thing." Another laughed, nudging his companion. "Seriously, she should stick to paper targets. Anything with motion will wipe that grin off her face." Clenched her jaw, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. For a moment doubt flickered, the familiar, unwelcome ghost of uncertainty that had haunted her since her father passed. She could hear the ridicule, could almost feel the weight of every skeptical eye pressing on her shoulders. But then she remembered her father's voice, calm and firm, echoing through her memory. "The rifle listens to calm hands. Breathe, focus, control the moment." She inhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her body. Each breath was deliberate, each exhale steadying her nerves. She reminded herself that the other trainees' opinions did not define her skill, nor did they reflect the years of practice and the lessons she had internalized long ago. Her confidence, though hidden, was real. It had been forged in the quiet mornings of her childhood and strengthened by the discipline instilled in her by a man who had believed she could achieve perfection. The first moving target rolled into view, adjusted her stance, shifting her weight just slightly to counter the motion. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, eyes tracking the target's path with precise calculation. Then, with a calm, deliberate squeeze, she fired. The bullet struck true. There was a sharp metallic ping as it hit the center of the small metal plate. A few nearby trainees gasped. Others froze mid-laugh, surprised that the shot had succeeded. His next target approached faster, weaving slightly with the wind. She tracked it, allowing her body to move with the rhythm of the target rather than against it. Another shot, and another metallic ring confirmed her accuracy. She did not rush. Each motion was measured, each shot intentional. Even the veterans watching were forced to acknowledge the skill unfolding before them. But the mockery was relentless. Carson stepped closer, loud enough to draw attention. "Looks like a fluke," he shouted. "One lucky shot, don't get too confident." His hands remained steady, her expression calm. She ignored the words, focusing instead on the next target. She knew this was more than a test of marksmanship. It was a test of character. Every eye watching her, every whisper of doubt, was an obstacle she needed to overcome with composure. She had learned over years of quiet practice with her father that skill alone wasn't enough. Patience, mental strength, and the ability to maintain focus under scrutiny were just as important. The remaining targets rolled forward, tracked each one, her rifle an extension of her will. Bullseye after bullseye, she continued to hit the marks with precision. The instructor, who had been watching silently, raised an eyebrow in surprise. The group that had laughed moments ago now looked on in stunned silence. The disbelief on their faces was palpable. For a few moments, it seemed as though time had slowed. The only sound, the faint hum of the wind through the pines, the soft click of the trigger, and the metallic ping of bullets meeting their targets. Yet even as her performance dazzled, felt the sting of the initial mockery. She remembered the whispers, the bets, the condescending smiles. While her shots were precise, the humiliation of being doubted in the first place had left a mark. She had faced it quietly, without argument, letting her skill do the talking. But inside there was a simmering anger, a desire not just to prove herself, but to honor the memory of her father, who had never doubted her for a second. The instructor stepped forward after her final shot. "Impressive," he said, his voice carrying across the range. "That's more skill than most of these recruits can demonstrate in months of training." Nodded politely, her face serene. She didn't boast, didn't gloat. She knew that the true measure of her skill wasn't the immediate reaction of her peers, but the quiet knowledge within herself that she had remained composed, precise, and unwavering under pressure. Some trainees approached her cautiously. A few offered awkward nods of respect, others lingered in disbelief, unwilling to admit they had underestimated her. Carson, the loudest critic, stood slightly apart, his arms crossed, jaw tight. He said nothing but could feel his gaze, heavy with unspoken challenge. She didn't look back at him. Her focus remained internal, centered on the calm confidence she had nurtured since childhood. During the break, the tension between and the other trainees simmered. They whispered among themselves, debating how someone with so little outward confidence could perform so flawlessly. Their questions weren't just about skill. They were about perception, expectation, and the discomfort of being proven wrong. Sat quietly, cleaning her rifle, letting the murmurs wash over her without response. The silence was a shield, her focus a weapon of its own. As she worked, she reflected on her journey. The path that had led her here was not one of showmanship or desire for approval, but one of dedication, loss, and resilience. She had returned to shooting not for recognition, but to reconnect with a part of herself she had thought lost forever. And in doing so, she had reminded herself of the lessons that truly mattered: patience, discipline, focus, and respect for the craft. By the time the next exercise began, her reputation, though unspoken, had shifted. Those who had mocked her moments earlier now regarded her with cautious curiosity. The whispers of doubt had been replaced with questions, tinged with respect and surprise. She had endured her first humiliation, faced the ridicule of her peers, and emerged with skill and composure intact, but knew this was just the beginning. More challenges awaited, more skeptical eyes would watch her every move, and the real test of her resolve was yet to come. As she picked up her rifle for the next round, allowed herself a moment of quiet determination. The memory of her father's teachings, the feeling of the rifle in her hands, and the knowledge of her own hidden strength combined to form a calm, steady confidence. She was ready for whatever came next, ready to face mockery, pressure, and doubt, and to prove, once again, that skill was born from patience, practice, and belief in oneself. His first day at the range had begun with whispered ridicule, humiliation, and doubt. It was ending with a quiet, undeniable truth. She was far stronger than anyone had anticipated, and her journey had only just begun. The morning had passed in a blur of metallic pings, shifting shadows and whispers that seemed to cling to like a heavy fog. Though she had performed flawlessly in the first exercises, the skepticism of her fellow trainees remained unbroken. In fact, their doubts had only hardened, sharpening into more pointed, deliberate mockery. Every small movement she made, from adjusting her stance to breathing before a shot, was observed, commented upon, and ridiculed. Carson, the broad-shouldered veteran who had loudly doubted her earlier, had gathered a small group of trainees behind her, whispering in tones just loud enough for her to hear. "She's nervous. Just wait that first success. Pure luck," he sneered. "By the end of this session, she'll be scrambling to hit anything." Others nodded, smirking, some even exchanging bets on how many targets she would miss before the day ended. The range, once a place of focus and discipline, had morphed into a stage of scrutiny and quiet ridicule. Could feel the sting of every comment, every whispered laugh, every sideways glance. Her cheeks flushed briefly, but she refused to show her frustration. Instead, she took a deliberate breath, recalling the countless mornings spent with her father in the backyard, He had never allowed ridicule to affect skill. "Let the rifle speak for you. Don't let their words steal your calm," he had said once, crouched beside her as she struggled with an early shot. Those words echoed now in her mind, steadying her resolve. The next drill began. The instructor had introduced a new challenge: shooting at multiple targets in succession, each at different distances and elevations. The task required quick reflexes, precise aim, and the ability to adjust to changing conditions, a test that most would find intimidating under observation, let alone under ridicule. Stepped forward, her rifle held loosely but confidently. The first target appeared small and distant, and she fired with careful precision. Bullseye. The second target rolled into view, slightly faster, angled, partially obscured by a tree. She adjusted, compensated, and squeezed the trigger, another perfect hit. Each shot became a rhythm, her movements deliberate, precise, almost dance-like. Behind her, the whispers grew louder. "I can't believe she just hit that one trainee muttered. "There's no way she's doing it again." Carson's face twisted in frustration, a flicker of anger crossing his features. "Come on, even a blind squirrel could hit that first one. Watch, she'll miss the next three." Ignored him. She had learned long ago that the mind could be a weapon or a prison. If she allowed their words to infiltrate her focus, she would fail. If she let their disbelief fuel her determination, she could excel beyond what they imagined. She chose the latter. By the fifth target, her mastery was undeniable. Her shots rang out with precision, each one landing exactly where she intended. The instructor, observing from the side, stopped packing and tilted his head, a mix of admiration and surprise in his eyes. His performance was not just technically sound. It was almost poetic in its calm and deliberate execution. The murmurs from the group shifted from derision to shock. Some tried to hide it, exchanging uneasy glances, while others simply stopped talking, mouths slightly open. The mockery that had defined the morning began to crumble under the weight of undeniable skill. Yet even as the performance impressed onlookers, remained inwardly focused. The ridicule had not disappeared. It had only transformed into a challenge, a gauntlet she needed to run. Each doubter, each whispering skeptic was a measure of her own resilience. She adjusted her stance slightly, checking her footing and grip, and herself for the next series of targets. The instructor finally spoke, raising his voice to carry across the range. "This next set will test both speed and accuracy. Remember, patience and control matter more than raw power." His gaze lingered on for a moment, as though silently acknowledging her potential. As the targets rolled into motion, fired, one after the other smoothly, each shot faster than the last, yet equally accurate. She moved her body with the rhythm of the sequence, anticipating each target's path, adjusting her aim almost instinctively. Each bullseye was a quiet rebellion against the judgment that had been cast upon her all morning. By the time the series ended, the mockery had mostly ceased. Even Carson, who had dominated the morning with his loud doubts, could no longer mask the grudging respect in his expression. His eyes followed as she lowered her rifle, her calm composure intact. For the first time, the atmosphere shifted, a subtle acknowledgement that she was no ordinary trainee. During a brief pause, the group gathered near the benches for water. Some trainees exchanged quiet conversations, their tone subdued, almost conspiratorial. They discussed the possibility that skill wasn't luck, that her performance might reflect years of private, rigorous training. Others shook their heads, unwilling to fully admit it. Carson stood apart, arms crossed, trying to maintain an air of superiority, yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed his uncertainty. Sat alone on a bench, rifle across her lap. She took slow, deliberate breaths, letting the adrenaline subside and her focus sharpen once more. She knew the day wasn't over, that more challenges awaited, and that some in the group would continue to test her. But she felt a quiet satisfaction, not from the acknowledgement of others, but from her own awareness that she was proving herself in the way that mattered most, through skill, discipline, and composure. The next drill, the most challenging of the morning, required trainees to shoot from unconventional positions, kneeling, prone, and standing on uneven terrain. The objective was to test adaptability, precision, and the ability to remain composed under stress. Approached the challenge with the same methodical mindset that had guided her throughout the day. She adjusted her stance for the uneven ground, stabilized her breathing, and visualized the bullet's trajectory before gently squeezing the trigger. Each shot landed with astonishing accuracy. The targets, some placed at awkward angles or partially hidden behind natural obstacles, fell one by one under her careful aim. Observers could no longer dismiss her as lucky or inexperienced. Her skill was tangible, undeniable, and intimidating in its quiet precision. Even as she performed flawlessly, remained humble, her face calm, her focus inward. She knew that the ridicule of the morning had been a test in its own right, a test of character, resolve, and patience. By ignoring the mockery and letting her skills speak, she had maintained control, proving not just her marksmanship but her inner strength. By the time the morning exercises concluded, the mood among the trainees had shifted dramatically. Conversations no longer centered on bets and ridicule, but on curiosity and tentative respect. Some approached, offering cautious compliments or asking questions about her technique. Even Carson, still standing apart, avoided his usual condescending remarks, instead watching her with a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. Rose from the bench, shouldering her rifle, and felt a quiet pride. She had endured the morning, the mockery, the whispers, the doubt, and had emerged stronger, more focused, and more self-assured. The skills her father had taught her, long thought buried, were alive and precise, guiding her every movement. And though the day was far from over, she now understood a critical truth. No amount of ridicule or doubt from others could undermine the strength that came from experience, training, and inner resolve. As she walked to the next station, allowed herself a small, private smile. The morning had been difficult, humbling, and yet exhilarating. She had begun the day as a newcomer, doubted and underestimated. By its end, she had transformed in the eyes of many into someone to be respected, though she did not seek their approval. Her focus remained on her own mastery, her own growth, and the quiet connection to the lessons she had learned long ago. Knew the next challenges would be even more demanding, and that some in the group would continue to doubt or test her. But she was ready. Every insult, every whisper, every moment of ridicule had strengthened her resolve rather than diminishing it. She had learned that true strength lay not in the absence of doubt or adversity, but in the ability to remain calm, focused, and unshakable in their presence. And as the instructor called the next round of exercises, raised her rifle once more, her calm eyes scanning the targets, her heart steady, and her mind as precise as her aim. By midday, the Montana sun hung high in the sky, casting sharp, elongated shadows across the gravel and pine-studded hills of the rifle range. Carter had moved through a series of exercises that would have tested even the most seasoned shooters. Every target she had faced, every challenge thrown her way, had been met with precision and calm focus. Yet, despite her flawless performance, the weight of judgment remained. The murmurs of doubt from her peers hadn't fully dissipated, and she knew the final evaluation would be the true measure of her skill and of their skepticism. The instructor gathered the group for the last exercise of the day, a comprehensive evaluation designed to test accuracy, speed, and composure under pressure. Targets would appear at varying distances, angles, and elevations, some partially obscured by natural obstacles. The exercise required not just technical skill, but mental acuity and the ability to remain steady under observation. Listen carefully, the instructor began, his voice carrying across the range. This evaluation will determine your readiness for advanced training. Each shot counts. Focus, patience, and control are paramount. Step up when ready. His gaze swept the group, lingering briefly on. There was a faint spark of curiosity in his eyes, as though he had seen something in her performance that set her apart from the rest. Felt a flutter of nerves, but it was different this time. This wasn't fear, it was anticipation. Her hands rested lightly on the stock of her rifle, her fingers tracing the familiar grooves, recalling years of private practice and the countless mornings spent with her father. She inhaled deeply, letting her thoughts settle, letting her heartbeat synchronize with her breathing. Every lesson, every drill, every whispered instruction from her father's voice echoed in her mind. Calm hands, steady aim, focus. Around her, the other trainees exchanged glances, some confident, others uncertain. Carson, the loudest critic of the morning, stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes narrowing as he watched her, ignored the scrutiny. She had learned long ago that the opinions of others were irrelevant to her performance. The rifle, her focus, and her memories of disciplined practice were all that mattered. When the first target appeared, positioned herself, adjusting her stance to account for distance and wind. The target moved slowly across a slight incline, and she tracked it carefully, letting her body move with the rhythm of its path. Then, with deliberate precision, she squeezed the trigger. The sound of the shot echoed across the valley, and the first target dropped perfectly centered. A hush fell over the group. Even the instructor paused mid-step, raising an eyebrow in surprise. The movements were smooth, almost fluid, each adjustment precise and intentional. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. Each breath was measured, each motion deliberate. The rifle became an extension of herself, translating years of hidden skill into flawless execution. The next target appeared, moving faster and partially obscured by a small cluster of trees. Adjusted her stance, compensating for angle and distance, and fired again. Another bullseye. Murmurs rippled through the group, quiet at first, then growing in disbelief. The skepticism of the morning was fading, replaced by astonishment and cautious respect. Carson's frustration was visible. He muttered something under his breath but did not hear it. Her attention was entirely on the targets, the rhythm of her shots, and the internal calm she had cultivated over a lifetime of private practice. Every motion, every squeeze of the trigger was a reaffirmation of her training, a tribute to her father's meticulous instruction, and a testament to her resilience. The targets continued to appear in succession, each one more challenging than the last. Adjusted seamlessly, accounting for wind, distance, and elevation. Each shot rang true, each bullet striking the center with precision that left the group in stunned silence. Even the instructor, whose voice had remained calm and controlled all morning, could not hide a faint expression of awe. By the time she reached the final sequence of targets, was in a state of perfect focus. Her mind was clear, her hands steady, her body aligned with the rifle in perfect harmony. The last target, the farthest of the day, moved rapidly across a sun-dappled clearing. Inhaled slowly, exhaled with deliberate control, and fired. The bullet struck dead center, the metallic clang ringing across the valley. The range fell completely silent. The weight of disbelief, anticipation, and tension hung in the air. The group of trainees who had mocked her, whispered bets against her, and doubted her skill all morning now looked on in stunned admiration. Carson's arms dropped to his sides, his jaw slack, as he finally recognized the truth. Carter was no ordinary recruit. The instructor stepped forward, his face betraying a mixture of surprise and respect. "Incredible," he said, his voice steady but carrying weight. "Every target, every shot, perfect execution. I've rarely seen this level of skill in any trainee." Lowered her rifle slowly, exhaling a deep, controlled breath. She did not smile triumphantly. She did not boast. Her satisfaction was quiet, internal, and profoundly personal. This wasn't about proving the skeptics wrong. It was about honoring her father's lessons, reclaiming a part of herself she had long thought lost, and demonstrating that patience, focus, and discipline could achieve what others assumed impossible. The other trainees began to approach, some hesitantly offering words of acknowledgement. A few, still awkward with disbelief, muttered quiet apologies or congratulations. Carson, standing apart, avoided direct eye contact but nodded subtly, an unspoken acknowledgement of her skill. Ignored the need for external validation. Her performance had spoken louder than any words could. She stepped back from the lineup, rifle cradled gently in her arms, feeling a quiet sense of completion. Today had begun with ridicule, whispers, and doubt. It was ending with undeniable mastery, earned through skill, focus, and the unbroken connection to her father's teachings. The mockery that had shadowed her early steps had not been destroyed through argument or confrontation, but through silent, deliberate excellence. Allowed herself a private, fleeting smile. She had reclaimed something more than skill that day. She had reclaimed confidence, self-respect, and the quiet assurance that she could rise above the judgments of others. Her father's lessons had guided her hand, her focus had guided her mind, and together they had delivered perfection. As the instructor called the group together for final remarks, felt a subtle shift in the room. Skepticism had been replaced with respect. Disbelief had given way to admiration. The first seeds of acknowledgement were taking root, and yet remained calm, aware that mastery was not measured in fleeting moments of recognition, but in sustained discipline, composure, and commitment to one's craft. She knew that the day was far from over. There would be more challenges, more tests, and more opportunities for the skeptics to doubt. But she was ready. Every whispered insult, every bet against her, and every mocking glance had fueled her determination, transforming humiliation into focus and doubt into clarity. Raised her eyes to the targets once more, the Montana sun warming her face, and felt a surge of quiet resolve. This was the moment everything had begun to turn, the moment she had shifted from the underestimated recruit to a force of precision and skill that demanded respect. And deep within her, she felt her father's presence, proud and unwavering, guiding her through every shot, every breath, and every choice. The evaluation was complete, had proven herself. But the real victory was not in the acknowledgement of others. It was in the knowledge that she had met her own high standard, remained calm under pressure, and emerged stronger, more confident, and prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The afternoon sun cast long golden rays across the Montana range, turning the gravel and pine-studded hills into a scene of both beauty and tension. Carter had already proven herself in the morning exercises and the first part of the evaluation, but now came the moment that would truly separate skill from reputation. The instructor had set up a series of complex targets designed to challenge the shooter's precision, speed, and adaptability under pressure. The first targets were deceptively simple, small metallic plates at varying distances, but the complexity quickly increased. Moving targets, angled shots, partial obstacles, and faraway placements demanded every ounce of skill possessed. Every trainee approached with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Even those who had admired her performance earlier now looked on with silent curiosity, some still skeptical, others openly anxious. Stepped forward, adjusting her stance with the precision of a seasoned marksman. Her hands, calm and steady, gripped the rifle with a practiced ease. She inhaled deeply, the rhythm of her breath matching the focus of her mind. Every movement felt natural, fluid, almost instinctive, as if the rifle had become an extension of herself. She could hear the faint rustle of wind through the trees and sensed subtle shifts in the air, subtle cues that would guide her aim. The first target rolled into view, small and distant, tracked its motion with unwavering focus, her eyes calculating distance, angle, and wind. With a smooth squeeze of the trigger, the bullet struck perfectly at the center. The metallic ping echoed across the range, sharp and precise. A few trainees gasped, unable to hide their astonishment. Carson, who had been a vocal critic all morning, clenched his jaw, his expression tight with frustration and disbelief. The second target appeared almost immediately, moving faster and partially obscured by a small stand of trees. Adjusted, shifted her weight slightly and fired again. Another bullseye. Her shots had become a rhythm, seamless and deliberate, each one reinforcing the calm determination that had carried her through the day. The other trainees whispered amongst themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others leaning in closer to watch every detail. As the series progressed, precision never faltered. Targets appeared in succession, at odd angles, elevated on platforms, partially hidden by natural obstacles, and each was met with the same unwavering accuracy. Her hands remained steady, her posture perfect, and her breathing controlled. Each shot was a demonstration of years of training, practice, and inner discipline. Every move, every decision, every squeeze of the trigger reflected the lessons her father had instilled in her long ago. The crowd around the range grew quieter, replaced by awe and disbelief. The instructor, who had remained silent for most of the afternoon, stepped closer, his eyes fixed on. There was a rare spark of admiration in his gaze. He had seen many talented shooters over the years, but few displayed the combination of precision, patience, and composure that exhibited. Even Carson, who had been the most vocal critic, could no longer disguise his astonishment. He watched, arms crossed, jaw tight, as shots continued to strike dead center. Every doubt he had harbored was being systematically dismantled, shot by shot. He wanted to speak, to challenge her, but the undeniable mastery before him left him momentarily speechless. The final sequence was the most demanding: 3 moving targets, each at a different distance, 2 partially obscured by obstacles, and 1 appearing in rapid succession. This series required not just accuracy but speed and adaptability, a challenge that had caused even the most skilled shooters in the group to falter. Took her position, lowering herself into a slight crouch to accommodate the obstacles. Her mind cleared, focusing entirely on the rhythm of the targets, the subtle shifts in the wind, and the mechanics of her own body. The first target rolled into view, tracked it, squeezed the trigger, and struck perfectly. The second followed, faster, moving diagonally across a partially shaded area. Another bull's. Her body remained calm, her hands steady, her mind sharp. The final target appeared, distant and moving unpredictably. Adjusted, exhaled slowly, and fired. The bullet struck exactly where she intended. Perfect. Every target, every shot had been executed flawlessly. The silence that followed was palpable. No one spoke. The metallic pings of her bullets had stopped, but their impact lingered in the stunned expressions of the trainees. The instructor finally broke the silence, his voice carrying authority and admiration. "Extraordinary, every target, perfect execution. This is skill beyond what I've witnessed in years of training." Lowered her rifle, exhaling deeply. She didn't smile or boast. Her satisfaction was quiet, internal, and profound. This was not about proving herself to others, but about honoring her father's lessons and demonstrating the culmination of years of quiet practice, patience, and focus. Every moment of doubt and ridicule she had endured that morning had been transformed into unwavering precision. The trainees approached cautiously, some offering quiet nods of respect, others attempting hesitant praise. Their expressions varied: disbelief, awe, admiration, and even a hint of jealousy. Carson, still standing apart, finally nodded subtly, a silent acknowledgement that skill was undeniable. The hierarchy of confidence in the group had shifted irrevocably. Walked slowly back to the benches, rifle cradled gently in her arms. She felt a sense of quiet accomplishment, knowing that she had maintained control under pressure, faced ridicule with composure, and executed her skill with perfection. The respect she had earned was not the primary reward. The real triumph was the reaffirmation of her own capabilities, her own discipline, and her ability to rise above judgment. The instructor gathered the group for final observations. "Carter has demonstrated precision, focus, and composure at a level few reach in years of training. Take note, skill is not just physical, it's mental. It's patience, calm, and awareness. Every shot she fired was a testament to that." As the group dispersed for a short break, whispers spread like wildfire. Questions arose: who was she trained by? How had she acquired such skill? How long had she been practicing in private? Remained seated quietly, her eyes scanning the range but her mind elsewhere. She thought of her father, the lessons he had given her, the countless hours of training, and the discipline instilled through patience and repetition. She knew the accolades from others were secondary. The true reward was the mastery itself, the connection to her training, and the quiet knowledge that she had executed her skill flawlessly under pressure. Today had been a crucible, a test of both ability and character, and she had emerged unbroken, precise, and calm. As the final targets were removed and the range cleared, felt a wave of relief mixed with pride. The mockery, the doubt, the whispers of skepticism, all had been transformed into admiration and acknowledgement, though she didn't need anyone else to validate her abilities. She had proven to herself, and to the memory of her father, that she could perform under pressure, maintain composure, and achieve perfection. Even Carson approached eventually, shaking his head in disbelief. I didn't expect that," he muttered almost inaudibly. Simply nodded, a faint, private smile touching her lips. Words were unnecessary. Her performance had spoken louder than any explanation. The day ended with the quiet satisfaction of mastery. Had hit every target, faced every challenge, and maintained her focus under scrutiny and mockery. She had turned ridicule into motivation, doubt into precision, and skepticism into acknowledgement. Today, Carter had not only proven her marksmanship, but also demonstrated the quiet, unshakable strength that lay within her. The Montana sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the range, and allowed herself a moment of reflection. Every shot, every breath, every careful adjustment had been a testament to her training, her discipline, and her inner strength. She knew that this was not the end, that future challenges would test her skill and resolve further, but she also knew that she was ready. Every lesson from her father, every moment of practice, every ounce of calm and focus was alive and precise in her hands. Today, she had achieved perfection in action, and everyone who witnessed it knew Carter was no ordinary recruit. The late afternoon sun began its slow descent over the Montana range, casting long, golden shadows across the gravel and pine-studded hills. Carter walked slowly along the line of benches, rifle slung comfortably across her back. Her body felt the familiar ache of muscle tension from hours of careful practice, yet her mind was sharper than ever. The day had been exhausting, challenging, and humbling, but she had faced every trial with precision and composure. For most of the morning, she had been the object of skepticism, mockery, and whispered bets. But as the day progressed, the mood among the other trainees had shifted, almost imperceptibly at first, then more noticeably. Murmurs of doubt gave way to quiet whispers of curiosity. The hesitant nods of respect became more frequent, though still cautious. Had always been aware of the scrutiny she faced, but now she realized that something had fundamentally changed. The attitude toward her skill, her presence, and her unshakable calm had shifted entirely. Even Carson, the most vocal critic earlier in the day, had approached cautiously. His broad shoulders were slightly hunched, his arms no longer crossed defensively. You're better than I expected," he admitted quietly, almost reluctant to speak the words. Merely nodded, her face serene. She did not need to hear validation from him. The recognition mattered, but her satisfaction came from her own mastery, from the quiet knowledge that she had proven her skills under pressure. The instructor, who had overseen the day's exercises, gathered the group once again for final remarks. "Today, we have witnessed a demonstration of exceptional skill," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "One trainee in particular has shown composure, precision, and adaptability that surpasses expectations. Carter, your performance today has been flawless. Every shot, every adjustment, every moment of focus, it was exemplary. Take note, everyone, that true skill is a combination of practice, patience, and mental discipline." A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the group. Some trainees nodded solemnly, others murmured words of admiration. The skepticism that had defined the morning had vanished completely, replaced by recognition, and in some cases, awe. Remained quiet, her expression calm, letting the instructor's words settle into the minds of her peers. She did not need applause or accolades, her performance had spoken volumes. During the short break following the announcement, several trainees approached her. Some were tentative, unsure of how to address the woman who had their expectations all day. A young man, slightly embarrassed, asked, How did you do that? Your aim, your focus, it's incredible." Smiled faintly, a quiet warmth in her expression. "Years of practice," she replied softly. "Patience and focus. That's all it takes." She didn't boast, didn't offer a detailed explanation. Her performance was proof enough. Another trainee, a woman who had whispered skepticism in the morning, approached with a tentative smile. I didn't believe it at first," she admitted. "But you're amazing. You're precise, calm, and fearless." Nodded, acknowledging the words without arrogance. She had learned that true mastery didn't require constant validation. It was evident in action, in consistency, in the ability to remain steady under pressure. Even Carson, still awkward, managed a subtle nod of respect. He didn't speak, but his expression had softened, a quiet acknowledgement that skill was real and undeniable. The shift in the group dynamic was palpable. The initial ridicule had been replaced with cautious respect, the whispers of doubt with admiration, and the overt skepticism with recognition of genuine talent. Reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The ridicule and doubt of the morning, though painful, had been a catalyst. They had forced her to focus, to dig deep into the reservoir of skill and discipline instilled by her father. Every morning in the backyard, every lesson in patience, precision, and composure had prepared her for this exact moment. Today had been more than a test of marksmanship. It had been a test of character, resilience, and focus. The final exercise of the day was yet to come, a culmination of everything the trainees had learned. Approached the setup with calm determination. The targets were complex, moving, and positioned at varying distances and angles. The objective was to demonstrate mastery under pressure, combining speed, accuracy, and mental discipline. Her mind cleared, her body aligned perfectly with her rifle, and her hands remained steady. As the first target appeared, she fired, striking perfectly. The metallic ping echoed across the range, sharp and deliberate. The second target followed, and then the third. Each shot was executed with flawless precision, the culmination of years of practice and quiet determination. Her performance was a testament not only to skill, but to the discipline of mind and body, a demonstration of mastery that left no room for doubt. The instructor observed closely, nodding subtly with approval. Movements were fluid, precise, and deliberate, every shot a reflection of focus and control. Even the previously skeptical trainees watched in awe, unable to hide their admiration. The performance was not only technically flawless but also deeply compelling in its calm, methodical execution. When the final target fell, perfect and unblemished, the range erupted in quiet acknowledgement. Some trainees clapped softly, others simply shook their heads in disbelief. The initial critics were now among her admirers, their skepticism replaced with genuine recognition. Lowered her rifle, exhaling slowly, feeling the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and skepticism, and had emerged not just unbroken but stronger, more confident, and fully in command of her skills. The transformation in the attitudes of those around her was evident, yet she remained grounded, aware that true mastery was measured not in applause or acknowledgement but in consistency, discipline, and composure under pressure. As the day drew to a close, gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the range. The sun had dipped lower, bathing the landscape in warm, golden light. The other trainees, once dismissive and mocking, now regarded her with respect, some approaching quietly to offer congratulations or ask questions. Accepted the acknowledgments with quiet grace, her mind focused on the deeper satisfaction of personal achievement and the memory of her father's teachings. Walking off the range, felt a sense of completion. The day had been a crucible, testing not just her skill but her resilience, composure, and inner strength. She had faced doubt, mockery, and pressure, and had emerged with flawless performance and quiet mastery. The respect and recognition she had earned from her peers were gratifying, yet secondary to the personal victory she had achieved. Knew that the journey was not over. Mastery was not a destination but a continuous process of practice, focus, and discipline. Yet today had proven something profound, that skill, patience, and quiet determination could overcome skepticism, doubt, and ridicule. Her father's lessons had guided her hand, Her focus had guided her mind, and her perseverance had transformed every challenge into an opportunity for excellence. As she walked down the gravel path toward the parking area, rifle in hand and head held high, Carter felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The skeptics, the mockers, and even the most vocal critics had witnessed her precision, focus, and composure. She had turned doubt into admiration, ridicule into respect, and pressure into flawless execution. The Montana sun continued its descent, painting the landscape in rich shades of gold and amber. Paused for a moment, looking out over the range, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent, a skill proven and a character strengthened. Today had been a triumph not for recognition, but for mastery, a victory that belonged entirely to her, grounded in years of practice, discipline, and the enduring lessons of her father. The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the Montana hills, casting the rifle range in hues of gold and amber. A quiet wind rustled through the pines, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of spent bullets and gunpowder. Carter stood at the center of the range, rifle in hand, surveying the landscape that had been both a proving ground and a crucible. Today had been more than a test of marksmanship. It had been a test of character, focus, and resilience. All day she had faced skepticism, ridicule, and outright mockery from her fellow trainees. From the very moment she had arrived, she was underestimated, her quiet demeanor mistaken for inexperience or weakness. Whispers of doubt had trailed her, sarcastic smiles and bets had been made against her, and some had even outright laughed at the suggestion that she could excel. But through it all, remained calm. She had known, deep down, that skill required patience and discipline more than recognition, and that composure under pressure was more important than the approval of others. Her journey through the day had been transformative. Every exercise, every moving target, every difficult shot had tested her in ways both physical and mental. She had endured the sneers, the whispered doubts, and the palpable tension of being the object of scrutiny. Yet with each challenge she had grown stronger, more focused, and more confident. By the afternoon, the skepticism had given way to astonishment, admiration, and finally respect. The final evaluation had her reputation. Every target, no matter how distant or obscure, had been struck with flawless precision. Focus had remained unbroken, her movements measured and exact, her breathing steady and controlled. Even the most vocal critics, those who had bet against her abilities earlier in the day, now approached her with quiet acknowledgement. Carson, the broad-shouldered veteran who had mocked her most openly, had nodded subtly, a silent concession that skill was undeniable. The instructor stepped forward, his expression serious yet filled with respect. "Carter," he said, his voice carrying across the range, "today you have demonstrated what true mastery looks like. Your precision, composure, and mental discipline are exceptional. You've not only proven your skill to all present, but you've shown what patience, focus, and dedication can achieve. This is the standard we all should aspire to." Lowered her rifle slowly, exhaling a deep, controlled breath. She didn't smile triumphantly or boast. The satisfaction she felt was internal, quiet, and profound. She had not sought validation, and yet recognition had come naturally because her skill demanded it. Today was not about proving the doubters wrong. It was about honoring her own training, her discipline, and the lessons her father had instilled in her from the very beginning. As the group dispersed, several trainees approached, each offering quiet congratulations or asking questions about her technique. A few lingered awkwardly, unsure how to express their respect, while others were more direct. "I've never seen anyone shoot like that," one young man admitted. "Every shot perfect. How did you do it?" Smiled faintly, acknowledging the compliment without arrogance. "Years of practice," she said softly. "Patience, focus, and knowing how to stay calm under pressure. That's all it takes." She did not elaborate further. Her performance had spoken louder than words ever could, and she was content to let it stand on its own. Even Carson, who had spent much of the morning as her most vocal critic, approached cautiously. "I underestimated you," he admitted, almost grudgingly. "You were flawless. I didn't think anyone could handle that kind of pressure." nodded, accepting the acknowledgement with grace. There was no triumph in gloating. The victory lay in her composure, discipline, and mastery. As she walked away from the range, rifle slung over her shoulder, allowed herself a moment of reflection. The day had been a journey, one that tested her both physically and mentally. She had endured ridicule, faced skepticism, and navigated the intense scrutiny of her peers. Yet through it all, she had maintained focus, executing every shot with precision and grace. She had turned doubt into determination, mockery into motivation, and pressure into perfect execution. Thought of her father whose lessons had guided her every move. His voice echoed in her mind. The rifle listens to calm hands. Focus, patience, control, that is how you master it. Every shot she had taken today was a tribute to his teachings, a reflection of the discipline and resilience he had instilled in her from childhood. She had honored his memory through mastery, and in doing so, she had reclaimed a part of herself that had been dormant for years. The trainees who had doubted her now looked at her with quiet respect. Their attitudes had shifted completely, skepticism replaced by admiration, derision replaced by acknowledgement. Did not seek their approval, yet she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had earned it through skill, discipline, and unwavering focus. The transformation in their perception was as much a testament to her composure as to her marksmanship. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the Montana landscape, packed her rifle and belongings. The day was over, yet its lessons and triumphs would remain with her forever. She had proven, above all else, that skill, patience, and inner strength could overcome doubt, mockery, and pressure. Every challenge, every whispered insult, and every skeptical glance had been transformed into a stepping stone toward mastery. Walking toward her vehicle, felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The day had begun with ridicule, whispers of doubt, and challenges designed to test her skill and composure. It had ended with flawless execution, quiet acknowledgement, and a deep internal satisfaction. She had faced every obstacle with calm precision and emerged not only victorious but transformed. Her thoughts turned inward, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. It was not merely the rifle skills that mattered, but the discipline, focus, and composure that had carried her through. She realized that mastery was not about external validation, but about internal control, personal growth, and the ability to remain steady under pressure. Today had been proof, to herself more than anyone else, that she possessed all of these qualities in abundance. Paused at the edge of the range, looking back over the vast expanse she had conquered through skill and focus. The metallic targets, the gravel paths, and the shadowed pine hills bore witness to her journey. She breathed in the crisp mountain air, feeling a quiet connection to the lessons of her past, the discipline of her present, and the promise of her future. As she drove away from the range, felt a quiet smile form on her lips. The mockery, the doubt, and the whispered bets of the morning had been nothing more than catalysts, tests that had sharpened her focus and honed her skill. The respect she had earned from her peers, though gratifying, was secondary to the internal triumph she felt. She had proven, above all, that true mastery comes from patience, discipline, and unwavering focus, and that ridicule and doubt can be transformed into fuel for excellence. That evening, as the sun set behind the Montana hills, reflected on the day's events with a sense of quiet pride. She had faced every challenge, executed every shot perfectly, and maintained composure in the face of skepticism and mockery. She had honored her father's teachings, proven her skill, and earned the respect of those who had doubted her. Most importantly, she had learned that true mastery is measured not by the opinions of others, but by discipline, focus, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. In that moment, Carter knew something profound. The rifle, the training, and the scrutiny had been instruments not just for measuring skill, but for revealing character. She had emerged stronger, more confident, and fully aware of her own abilities. The day's journey had transformed her from the underestimated trainee facing ridicule to a master of precision, focus, and composure. And as darkness fell over the Montana hills, drove home with a quiet, steady confidence. She had faced doubt, mockery, and immense pressure, and she had triumphed not for recognition, not for applause, but for the mastery that came from patience, focus, and unwavering inner strength. Today, she had hit every target perfectly, and in doing so she had proven something far greater, that true excellence is born from discipline, resilience, and belief in oneself.